Welcome to Triple Sigma. Joining us today is a very special guest, as they all are. Today we have an esteemed sports psychologist who works not only with elite athletes, but also elite businessmen around the country. Bhrett McCabe. Bhrett, how you doing?
I'm great. Good to be here. Dive in a little baseball, two diamond guys, but we'll have a good time today.
Coming to us live from Tuscaloosa. We're recording, but he's live right now. He's alive. Right before Alabama starts their college football playoff run, because they, unfortunately for me, but fortunately for Bhrett, beat the Vanderbilt Commodores earlier in the year. Bhrett, when you're working with elite athletes, what is the most surprising aspect about their approach and their psychology that you have a tough time convincing the average person of that they can actually learn from too?
I think when we look at elite performers, we assume that they have some sort of magic bullet, right? They've cracked a code, they've got a mystery box that they've been opened up to. The reality of the fact is most people who are highly successful have gotten there from a couple reasons. That they usually have a super skill, they have a strength that they're really good at, that timing is aligned it, and that they're really stubborn to their work ethic and their belief. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody works hard, succeeds, and everybody who's succeeded works hard, right? But that superpower skill that they have is that they know their strengths. And if you talk to people who are at the top of what they do, there's a simplicity and that's elegant. There's an elegance in their simplicity. I think we overcomplicate things all the time. That used to be my Twitter bio, was that it's not that hard. We just make it that way. I think we instinctively know what needs to be done. I think we try to do, 3-day goal setting seminars when you know what the goal is, right? I think we try to redefine everything, but we know we just get up and get moving is a good start. So I think when you look at the best of the best, there's a simplicity to it. I spent 10 years around Coach Saban. I spent 5 years around Coach Bertman, two greatest coaches to coach in their individual sports in college. Both of them had a simplicity about their system. They just knew that most people didn't have the guts to sustain it.
Yeah. Well, it's because I have found in my experience as an elite athlete and also as an entrepreneur that complexity sells, but simplicity wins. And, if you're trying to convince a recruit or an athletic department or a general manager or an owner that you are going to bring on this new wave of success that they have never experienced before, it's easier to make that pitch when you say, oh, these are the things that we're going to do that we haven't been doing yet. It's a lot harder to make that pitch by saying you've actually been doing all of the things that you need to be doing, but you're doing too much.
Yeah.
And you need to do 60% less. And I'm the expert in identifying the 60% less that you need to do, because it's very counterintuitive to people that they should be paying money to be taught to do what they already know how to do, but less of it.
Well, we fall into that in business. We have the death by meeting march, where we have to meet. And if people just did their job, they finished their tasks. Leaders had let out a clear vision. They empowered their employees. They held them to high standards. They delivered accountability. You wouldn't need to have meetings, right? I know when, you start writing books, and I've written a couple books, and you start looking at it as like, what does it take to succeed or whatever, the mental side. And to your point, we want to fill the book so people get their money's worth. But the reality of the fact is that if you just said, do you know, or can you eliminate the barriers that are preventing you from doing the things that you already know? It would be a 1-chapter book, right? But at the same time, when you're not achieving success, the complexity that you see in your future is cluttered with so many distractions, so many doubts, so many uncertainties, that it's really hard to know. I kind of use the reference to the old school folks dialing in a radio station. You fine tune it in. Back in the day when you get in your car and you had a dial radio, you'd drive around town and you'd have to continually fine tune it because you may lose the signal if you got around a little bit on the outskirts. That's what we have to do a lot of times. We naturally have what we call a motivational drift, where we get started and then soon we start losing interest in it because the joy and the success isn't there. I had a interesting conversation the other day with one of my young elite college golfers. I do a lot of work on the golf side, and he asked a really interesting question, and I think you'll appreciate it. He said, I'm scared about the professional run because everybody I speak to some very dear friends of mine tell me how hard it is and how they didn't find the joy in it that they
Mhm.
thought. And we had a really long discussion about it. And I said, when you start your journey, you have to have early success and joy to keep you going. And those propulsion systems keep you engaged, because if not, you'd lose interest, you'd go to something else. But as you get closer to the top of the mountain, to the pinnacle, the summit of what you want, there's a lot more people reaching for it. And you have to find validation. I hate that word. You have to find reinforcement. You have to find the propulsion from things other than joy and success. Because even on the best vacation of your life, there's stressful days that you don't enjoy.
Yep.
But when we look back in retrospect, we value it. That conflict creates a lot of noise when we're on that uncertainty journey.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and it definitely tracks with my experience as a elite baseball player. Where, I chose baseball because it was something that I was good at, that I thought that I had the opportunity to be successful in. I didn't particularly love the sport of
Hmm.
baseball. I think if I probably chose a sport to be successful in when I was 14 or something, football might have been it. But I was good at baseball. I had good hand-eye coordination, and that was really the sport that I could have succeeded the most at. If maybe hockey would have been another one
Hmm.
if I'd grown up in the Northeast, just because it has similar hand-eye requirements with a little bit of a conditioning component to it. But as I got higher up, it became harder and harder to just work the hardest and also be the best.
Mhm.
And so the work stayed the same, but the dopamine diminished. And when the work stays the same and the dopamine diminishes, you get burnout. And so, how do you
There's really only one thing that will produce a consistent dopamine burst.
drugs,
Pretty much.
sex? Yeah.
Coke, no, not even sex, cocaine.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and even that, you're chasing the original high, so we get on that dopamine hunt, right? Where just exactly what you said. Why does baseball have to be fun if you're good at it? Right? You can enjoy layers of success. We have sold kids. I had a conversation with a college athlete one day where they came in and they were just distraught. Coach said, you're struggling. And if you don't love this, it ain't right for you.
Mhm.
And she sat here and she cried. She goes, I don't love it. I don't
Right.
love it. I don't love getting up at 4:30 in the morning to go train. I don't love having my body ache. I don't love. And I said, that's normal. Like, I think I have a great job, man. There's weeks that I'm going from, working the week at the Masters with my players to the next week sitting in major league dugouts to the next week being in boardrooms to the next week. I mean, I dig what I do. Like, I am
Mhm.
very blessed by the opportunities that I have in the world that I live in. But there are days that I wake up and I'm like, man, 3 missed flights, got an angry player or player's not playing well, I'm frustrated. Why do I do this? Right.
Mhm.
And, if you and I moved into a, Ritz Carlton or St. Regis or one of the highest, hotel brands in the world, within a week we'd go, hey, you realize the coffee downstairs is just not as good as the coffee around the corner at that coffee shop. We lose the joy of what we're doing because joy's got to get us the engagement. Same in a relationship. You meet your partner, you meet your spouse, there's a lust, there's an attraction. But over time, successful relationships develop levels that far exceeds the initial attraction. Doesn't mean the attraction goes away, but you don't have the depth and levels of an initial interaction. There's no way. You can't know about somebody's longest term dreams and visions and insecurities when you see them walk by you and you think, oh my God. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's the same in any pursuit we're on. So there's times that we have to season it. There's times that we have to take a break, but there's times that we have to check our ego and ourself and say, why do I do this? Why is it that I'm on this hunt and this journey that I'm on? That self-reflection is critical, absolutely critical.
Well, what happens when you find out a lot of the reasons why people are on hunts are rooted in insecurities that have either not been addressed by their success or more than sufficiently addressed by their success?
Can
They
we
no
ever
longer
really get rid of insecurities though? See, I think we all carry and harbor insecurity themes that are unique to us, that have been formed by our upbringing, experiences, fears, doubts. And how much evidence do we need in order for that fear to go away? Because what happens is we may itch, but as we get away from it, that fear is still there. Time and avoidance creates a stronger fear. So
Mhm.
the more time we're away from something, the more we avoid it. If we fear that we're going to be presented with it again, it's going to show up. So one of the ones I hear a lot is, why do I worry about what other people think? Okay. Well, you're human. It's a core human drive to care about social status. It's part
Sure.
of it. It's part of the genetic reproduction system. We're genetically pre-coded to reproduce. You don't want to reproduce with people who are lower in your status. It's not good for your offspring. And from a biological drive, we are attracted to people who have higher status than us. But we're never happy with the status we have. You think you have a big boat? Go to the Bahamas. You'll find somebody with a bigger boat. I've never met a content billionaire.
Right.
They want 2 billion. They need
Right.
5 billion. And they'll rationalize it all day. I got more money than my grandkids' kids will have. But it's not that. It's
Right.
there's an insecurity. And whether we call it an insecurity or drive, very much the same. Most of us are driven to overcome insecurities more than achieve desires. Now, when they
Yes.
align, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I look at a lot of billionaires or hyper successful people who continue to put the work in as almost like dopamine addicts. And a lot of the, work that I've done over the last several years has led me to believe that, a lot of people are dealing with chronic anxiety of some sort. And rather than seeking to develop serotonin or oxytocin through bonding with their families, they've learned to try to offset their cortisol with dopamine. But of course, cortisol
Mhm.
is never sufficiently offset by dopamine, and
Correct.
so you end up prescribing and then over prescribing the wrong hormone to offset the stress hormone, and you just end up needing larger and larger quantities of that wrong hormone to make you feel calm. And it's a great way to keep you on a hamster wheel, but it's not a great way to actually find fulfillment.
Okay, so what is the greatest motivator we have? No, we can.
Procreating.
Well, that, but even before procreation, survival. Okay,
Okay, living
fear,
survival. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fear and threat is the greatest motivator we have.
Yeah.
I read a lot of leadership books, and I cringe at 95% of them
Mhm.
because we can come out with the love-based coaching models, right? It's made people lots of money in the bookstores. Okay. You got to love the people you work with. And what we've done is we've created a lot of kids from the Barney generation that feels that criticism and feedback, negative feedback, is a rejection of them
Mm.
because we prepared them that great coaches and leaders should love you. It should be a fun environment. I've never been around a coach that is successful or a leader who is successful who cannot share full feedback.
Right.
Okay. Now, as coaches and leaders, now we have to prepare our generation to be able to do that. But the best motivator we have, the best parenting that we have, is when kids have an ounce of fear about their parents. There's an authority there. If they don't respect the boundaries, they will never define discipline.
Hmm.
We never, because we just lose it. If we took a dog and we bought a dog and we did not crate it, did not teach it, whatever, when it rained and thunderstormed, it would piss all over the living room and tear things up. If you crated it, taught it discipline, it would go to where it feels secure, which is structure and boundaries. It's the same of any team, right? So the greatest motivator we have is the avoidance of the things that we fear. It's a negative reinforcement loop.
Mhm.
Now, the beauty of it is that it is stronger than desire. So I'll give an example. My father-in-law sold his business, never had to work another day in his life. He grew up very poor. He grew up having to, he won't eat chicken to this day because they raise chickens and eggs to
Mhm.
make a living. He looks at his account every day to make sure he has enough to live until he dies. He never really looked at it as a way to grow it. And that's
Mhm.
fine, right? And there are people who do that. But he was never going to make a risky investment.
Right.
Okay. He knew that regardless of what the market did, he was going to sustain growth to make sure that until he lived to very healthy in his life. And he's very happy. He's very comfortable because he was avoiding repeating the sins of what he had to go through as a kid.
Sure.
He lost his father when he was 8, and it was a very tough road. There are other people who achieve billionaire status or whatever, and their goal is they are chasing the hunt. But if you deep down ask them, they may be chasing the hunt because somebody told them they couldn't do it,
Hmm.
or they had a mentor in their life who inspired them because of something. And so I'm not saying you have to have these negative insecurities all the time, but we have to understand why our drivers are there. It's the same for an athlete. Why do we go to the ballpark every day? Do we prepare for what we don't know? Or do we get caught in the gap of eliminating problems and mistakes? We get in the trap of eliminating problems and mistakes. And the better we are at it, the more roaches we find versus saying, I can handle anything in front of me. And that's why anxiety builds, because we cannot eliminate every threat that comes to us.
Mm-hmm.
So our mind is really good at identifying threat. Doesn't mean it's accurate. Just means it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It just means there's a 1% probability that it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, the joy, how often do we get it? Man, one of the most powerful things to do is to, if you look at what are the drugs that are abused most right now in our country, fentanyl, anxiolytics, alcohol's going down, pot. People are like, oh, you don't abuse. Yeah, you do. They're escapisms.
Yeah.
They're
Food as
escapisms.
well.
Food, 100%. Sugar is an escapism. Absolutely. So, I think we have to look at that. And when we're coaching or leading people, it's not the fact that I don't want to lead through fear. But there has to be some consequences and accountability out there that does create fear. Like, I want to make sure I get my report in on time and it's done well so that I don't disappoint my manager. Okay. Sure. That's going to create a little bit of anxiety and arousal. That's okay. Do your job and succeed. And the desire of pride, but I also don't need a certificate or a gift certificate because I did a good job.
Right.
One
thing I've noticed with my mentors, the most successful ones, they are stricter with their expectations than 99% of people, but they're also more charismatic with their praise. And so I have rationalized this to understand that if you're stricter than 99% of people with your expectations, but you're not charismatic with your praise, then people ultimately resent you. And it becomes very difficult to lead them. Is this something that you teach? Is this something that you've observed? What is the proper balance that you see when setting expectations, but also offering praise on the backside, proper management tutorials, say 5-to-1 compliments to, to criticisms. How does that change when you're dealing with elite performers? How does that change when you're dealing with women and children? Do you coach women differently than you coach men based on this, optimum point?
It's a great question until where you went to college. So yes, I coach everybody different. Okay. Everybody has their own psychological fingerprint. My job is to figure it out and understand how to coach them. Something I learned from Coach Bertman long time ago. He told me, he said, every player has different buttons to push. Your job as a coach is to learn what those buttons are, when you can push them, and how often you can. If you do it too soon, you lose them forever. Coach Saban had information on every single player that came into this building. He knew their motivations. He knew what their strengths were. He knew who their influences were in their life. If they grew up without a father, he needed to spend time to build trust with them. If he came from a strong fatherly relationship, he could go after them because they had been gone after more than likely before. There's a very famous clip of A.J. McCarron on the sidelines getting absolutely chewed out and getting slapped on the rear end. A.J. came from a strong family. You weren't going to tell him something. He wasn't going to feel abandoned, okay, or disrespected. That was probably normal communication with his father at some point in his life. But I think, I always look at it as like a 3-to-1 positive to negative versus compliment to criticism. And positive doesn't need to mean you're so good. It's, hey, look, this was really good, but we're all hypercritical. We have a bias to hearing negative feedback. So you have to prepare people, and what happens is we as leaders oftentimes get angry and we deliver. And what happens is players, coaches, our people that work for us hear the drama of our message, not the data. And so great performers, great, work, everything. We have to learn to separate the data from the drama, because as leaders or coaches or mentors or whatever we're doing, sometimes we allow our emotions to drive. Sometimes that emotion is that I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. Okay. So I am urgent to share that with you. I want you to know what I see in you. I want you to understand how much more you have to you. But if you do not have high standards and don't have consistent accountability, then you're setting up a landscape that people will drift to avoidance. Every parenting model, leadership model that is high standards, high feedback, consistent, timely, constructive, critical, non-sarcastic. And it's okay if I leave you bruised. I don't want you hurt, but I can leave you bruised. But if I realize your psychological fingerprint is that you cannot handle feedback, I have to build up trust with you to do that if I want to invest in you. And sometimes people it's just it's too heavy of a lift, which is unfortunate. But that's true. That happens, right? Somebody's like, my job is not to be their parent. I see that in coaching a lot. Players come in, what do? They put up the walls, and then they create everybody's against me, nobody likes me. And they transfer out, and then they go back and say, man, I wish I had stuck it out because somebody was really invested in me, and I bailed, because avoidance of that critical feedback is hard. I think when you're talking about the underlying psychological fingerprint, historically, in a very gender stereotype. Females don't often want to be rewarded in public, praised in public amongst their peers. Males typically don't want to be criticized in public in front of their peers. That's changed a little bit. Tend to want, I mean, if we look at the core biological drive, hunters, gatherers, they're out there, they want to come back with the deer skin on their back and everybody celebrates their return.
Yeah.
They don't want to be chastised for they didn't bring in a big enough deer.
Right.
Okay. Females are typically more bonders, community connectors. They don't want to be praised because they know there's other people who've contributed and they want to make sure that the high tide rises all boats. Now, there is some uniqueness, and listen, everybody's unique and different. Okay. My mom was an identical twin. She and her sister had two different psychological dispositions. So when, we're talking about people, never forget that you coach an individual, you lead an individual. They are not an employee ID. They're not a jersey number. They're a person. The greatest thing that you can do as a leader is connect to the person you're leading. Understand who they are. Understand what their influences are, their boundaries, their barriers, respect them, understand them, but then also have a developmental plan for them. And that developmental plan needs to be shared with that person. As a leader, that's where the high standards and high accountability comes from. If you don't get feedback on somebody on their writing and then they turn in something you're unhappy with, then that's on you. As Coach Bertman, and I reference him a lot because of the influence that he had in my life. Well, I'll give you a story. I talked about it in one of the books I wrote. My father was 20 years Air Force, very strong, proud man. And I'll never forget, I'm an only child. And we had gone back. I was playing ball at LSU at the time. I was having the best fall of my life. Probably one of the glory times of my college time, right? I mean, everything was clicking. It was great. We go to this small town in Tennessee for my mom's parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And we're in a VFW. I mean, we're talking, look, this is the place where you want to go because somebody's going to bring the best red velvet cake you've ever had in your life. Somebody's going to bring the best cornbread. Okay. It's the best thing, but I'm seeing family and generations of family who haven't left the area. And I'm sitting at a table talking to my cousins who I'm very close with and my dad, and I hadn't seen them in a while. And I'll never forget, this lady walks up behind me and taps me on my left shoulder. And I kind of turn and look at her and said, "Oh, hey." She goes, "I am your great aunt, so-and-so." I said, "So good to see you." And then kind of went back to talking, and my dad looks at me and says, "Hey, let's go outside for a minute." And I was like, "Okay." So we walk outside, and he says, "Don't ever disrespect me or the family in that way again. When a woman walks up to you, particularly an elderly woman, somebody who's more mature than you stand up, you look her in the eye, you make her feel like she's the most important person in the world. It takes no effort, zero, but it'll make somebody's day. But instead, you disrespected her and the way I've raised you. Don't ever do that again." Okay. Never raised his voice. He gave clear feedback immediately in the moment, and the standard was established. And then he said, "Hey, let's go back inside and have a great day." No
That's
grudge.
great.
No
Yeah.
grudge. Okay. And so that last part, no grudge, is critical. As a leader, somebody can make a mistake. I want mistakes to happen. I want somebody to screw up, because what other way can I teach except for experience?
Mm-hmm.
And so when a mistake is happening, it's like, that's what I anticipate, not, "Oh my God." Because if we're coaching from an avoidance model, because we're afraid of what it makes us look like as a leader, as a coach, is whatever. Like, nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to fail. But we have to lose. We have to fail. Or we're not risky enough. But we have to use those moments to educate, because there's going to be another moment in the future. I'm 53 years of age now. It's been over 30 years. I have never forgotten that message. I stand up every time a woman comes up to meet me.
Oh, that's great. So you talked about Coach Saban and
Mm-hmm.
presumably many of the other coaches, wanting to build trust with, certain players on the team. Everybody, obviously, but certain players more than others. What are the most effective strategies that you've seen from a trust building standpoint between a leader and his players, or a leader and his employees?
The first thing in trust is consistency. If you're not consistent as a leader, then you have unpredictability and nobody can trust you. So if I go to a fast food agency, okay, so the model that we'll use is like, you can trust Chick-fil-A. Pretty much anywhere you go, they have a standard that's pretty high. You're probably not going to order 8 nuggets and get 6. You may get 9, but you're never going to get 6 in an 8 nugget pack. You can trust their delivery. If I go to another fast food agency that I'm not really a big fan of, you can kind of trust that they're inconsistent. I may get something ice cold. Usually when I'm on the road, I stop at McDonald's every morning to get coffee. I like the coffee, but I always check the temperature of it when I'm pulling out of the line, because there have been several times I've gotten it's ice cold. Okay. So what? Big deal. But it is a big deal when you've got time and you plant, right? So trust is about consistency, but trust is also about connecting to the person. Like, if I know what's important to you, There was an interview that he did with Tua Tagovailoa many years ago, and when Tua was playing at his best, and Coach Saban was talking about Game of Thrones. There was a reason he started watching Game of Thrones, was because it was important to Tua, and it allowed him to have a regular conversation with him, so that it wasn't all about football. And he would get up there and he'd talk and he'd be like, "Oh, I mean, Daenerys and this and that." And Tua was like, "Whoa." He cared enough to research what was important to him. And it wasn't, you say, well, that's kind of manipulative. No, it's building a bond. Whenever I'm meeting with people, I'm always trying to figure out what other interests you have. I want to know what things you like, because we may have commonalities there.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is about consistency. It's about that connection, right? And it's also about knowing that my values are equal to yours. And the only way we know values, right, is that we have that through communication. And we talk. I hate the terminology that my door is always open to you. Or I hate to hear parents of junior athletes, "Hey, go talk to the coach." Are you kidding me? Like, I never went into Coach Bertman's office and asked about playing time.
I never did either.
No, because you're intimidated. That's somebody you value. Now, where Coach was great was he used to always say, don't have your parent call me about your playing time, because if they do, then I'm gonna tell them the truth. Like, I'll probably tell them that you haven't been going to class, and I'll probably tell them that you need to get, you've got a C- in a class, and that you show up to, look like, maybe you're not taking care of your business on the side. Okay. But
that's not what Coach Corbin told us. Coach Corbin told us you'd be dismissed from the team if your parents asked me about playing time.
But here's what happened. I go home one time and I'm sitting at my house. It was a Sunday night. And all of a sudden my dad gets a phone call. This is before cell phones, right? Mm-hmm. It was Coach Bertman. He was just calling to check in and give Coach an update on me. So we often put these walls up with people that were leading in their support network. But Coach proactively, he didn't want that to be a conversation that he was not in control of, meaning he had a plan for me. And if now you're starting to get impatient with the plan, you're trying to question the plan, but he did a great job of educating the parents. And a lot of times what happens in coaches and leadership is we don't educate people. So people lose trust because, and I see this all the time, players like, "I don't understand why I'm not playing." And they're like, "Well, you just got to work harder. You just got to be more physical. You got to be more." What the hell does all that mean? What is physical? I got to be more aggressive. I don't know what that means. It's not wrong for a coach to say, "Hey, look, right now, you're not good enough to play every game in the SEC. You're just not. However, you're 19. When you're 21, you stick with this. They're going to be talking about you being a first-round draft pick because I have the best strength person around me. We're going to get nutrition right. You're going to get more experience. You're going to be around people. I may have to bring in somebody next year to play in your spot, so don't take that personally. Learn from them and beat them out." Well, what happens if I went to somebody in a business thing and said, I've got a pretty good salesperson and, they got chaos at home. They're, got young kids and they're running all over the place and they're like, "I need more money." And you said, "Well, I mean, I can't promote you." Well, what do you think they're going to feel? What are you going to feel? Hurt and no vision. If you said, "Listen, Bhrett, you're at a chaotic time right now and your priorities, I've been there. Okay. I get it. The priorities all over the place. I need you to focus on being the best salesperson you can. I think in about 5 to 10 years, I see you moving into leadership. So right now you need to lead and learn to lead in the environment you're in and study the experiences. So when you have people in your situation, it's not exposure to get out of stuff, right? Instead, it is understanding the walk that somebody has been there. And that's what we have to do. We have to connect to where people are. But we're so afraid to be honest with people because we're afraid we're going to lose them. And what we do is we lose them.
So how does it work then from a standpoint of a coach or an executive deciding, it is time to tell this player to transfer, or it is time to let this employee go? Yeah.
Look, sometimes having the right answer is like, look, I'll support you here if you want to stay. But, I can remember a baseball coach, not one I played for, would look in the dugout and say, "None of y'all will be here next year because I'm going to recruit you." I'm like, that doesn't motivate a kid. Put up on the wall what you're looking for. Right. All right. You played at Vanderbilt, right?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty solid players that came through that place.
Not bad.
I think it's the thing that you got to look at is like, what is the standard? When I showed up at LSU baseball, I was told I was going to redshirt my freshman year because we had 8 pitchers that were going to pitch in the major leagues. And we were bringing in a kid by the name of Steve Carsey, who was a first-round draft pick by the New York Yankees. Yeah. Yeah. And coach said, "You're not Steve Carsey, but in your 3rd year, I think you're going to start putting stuff together. He's ahead of you." We had Chad Auger, Paul Bird, Mike Soroka, all pitched a long time in the major leagues. We had many other guys. Okay. He's like, "You're not, I could play you, but you're not, you need to get underneath the arm of somebody like Chad Auger. Study from him, learn from him, be around him all the time. And I did. Absolutely, I did. Going into my third season, I broke camp as a third starter. And all of a sudden, scouts were like, where's this guy been? And then I suffered an injury in my shoulder, and that got me into psychology. And then I ended up pitching and leading the team in appearances my last 2 years. I was a reliever, but I lost velocity. I lost my professional skill set, right? But I had to learn how to pitch. But I was also approached to transfer many times. And I was like, no, because I have a plan for why I'm here. As a coach, if you don't tell somebody the plan, you create ambiguity. Ambiguity creates apathy. And apathy creates absence. People are gone. You can't inspire. But if I hear this a lot. Well, my coach doesn't really talk to the players that are on the, who are redshirting medically. Why not, coaches? Look, 15 minutes of a day is 1% of your day. You don't have 1% of your freaking day to go talk to a kid who's struggling down there in the training room every day. All right. Go. As a manager, go instead of, the reason I say I hate people walking in the office and open door, don't make an open door. Go to them. Hey, Alex, listen, let's go grab coffee tomorrow. I had no agenda. Don't say, don't scare them. Say, right. Let's go get coffee tomorrow. I haven't seen you. Okay. Managers, do it in a public place. Don't put yourself in anything like that, right? Like we got to talk about in today's world. Don't make anybody feel uncomfortable. Go sit in the lobby and have a cup of coffee and just say, tell me how things, don't say, tell me how things are going and give me any feedback. I ain't going to give you any feedback. Hey, tell me about the hardest thing that you had recently. Maybe I can help you solve, or have some topic points. Man, Stranger Things is coming out. My wife and kids and I love that show. Do you watch it? Find out stuff. If you know that somebody is a foodie, say, look, I went to the coolest new restaurant in town. Have you been there yet? Build the bond. You're not. And it's the same as coaches. If you're coaching somebody, walk down the dugout and sit next to them one day. Walk around in batting practice and talk to them, because you've got to create a trust avenue, a growth, a window to open up and help somebody. If not, you will lose them. Absolutely. Because somebody else is in their ear. Somebody else is in their ear telling them what they should be doing. And they don't have their best interest in mind. If you really believe you're good at what you do in leadership, then you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah. No, I could see so many use cases for this approach, not just, obviously within sports, but within any team building, within sales,
100%.
within relating to your kids or your family. This is a toolbook that, tool belt rule book that you could use and apply to building trust within people so that they go in the direction that you would like them to go. And that requires a lot of discipline on your side. I guess that's why most people aren't great leaders, and it takes the same amount of work that it takes to be a good player, to be a good leader. That's the craft that you have to develop. And, if you are leading an organization and you expect your sales reps to be making 150 cold calls a day, or your athletes to be getting up at 5:30 to train in the morning, and you're not putting the reps in to be the best leader that you can be, is that really realistic to expect them to put the work in that they need to put in to make you look good as a leader?
Yep. Totally. I learned that very early on. We don't train leaders, right? Leaders are assume responsibility. And I remember when I was in training, we worked in a medical hospital. We worked like medical residents, and every morning the medical teams would have grand rounds and they'd sit and talk about cases. And early on, we all went. And then when I became a leader, I had 2 small kids and I wouldn't get there in time. And so what happened was the people stopped going, and I was frustrated. Looking back at it, I failed them. If it was important, I would have been there. It became important that they were going to follow through. But if it was truly important, then I would have been there. And then they would have seen, okay, well, if it's that important to him, then there's something in it for me. If not, it's just, he's making me do this because I don't understand the value.
So if you're raising sons, a lot of times that people talk about raising kids is something that they didn't realize their parents were learning on the fly.
Yeah.
As a leader, you're trying to create leaders within your organization while you try to be the best leader you can possibly be yourself. So, oftentimes in life, it's one eye leading the blind, but convincing the blind that you're seeing with 2 eyes. So how do you paint the picture for leaders when you're developing them? Because when you're developing a leader, you have to do the same things to the leader that the leader has to do to his subordinates in terms of constructive vision, in terms of speak to them where they are in terms of building trust. So understanding that you're working with incomplete leaders, that's why they're coming to you and they always want to get better. What's a common game plan that you'll create for a guy whose weaknesses are in, trust building, and weaknesses might be in communication, but strengths are they have really good vision and they're very good, like a Lane Kiffin type
Mm,
guy. They're
mhm.
very good with X's and O's. They're not good in ways that are well known to other people. How do you paint an improvement plan so that they want to stick through the multi-year process that it will take to become a better leader?
So to your point, right? We have to surround leaders with people that help them. Okay. I think a chief of staff is one of the most powerful things that you can have, and that chief of staff better be the yin to your yang. Okay.
Mm,
Same like a head coach. A head coach who's dynamic probably has a rule driven person as their number one assistant. If they're a rule driven person, they probably have somebody who is the teddy bear that eases it, right? When they leave those meetings. That being said, too, I have also made a lot of mistakes in my business. So standing there looking at how do I grow? How do I produce? How do I do stuff? Going to find people who think they understand my business. And then if I would have just trusted my instincts, I would have been a lot better off and saved a lot of
sure.
money. So I want you to look at a leadership. I want you to look at life. I want you to look at parenting like a bookshelf. You collect books along the way. You get the lessons out of them you need. Those experiences, those interactions, those meetings, those seminars, those YouTube videos, those podcasts, all that. The end of our journey, we look at our bookshelf and there are sections that are mysteries that we solved. There's thrillers. There may be some tragedies. Hope not many, but there will be. There'll be some comedies. There'll be some biographies, probably some how-to plannings. There'll be some funnies. And you look back at your book at the end and go, I kind of get it. Like I've had a lot of really unique experiences. Being from South Louisiana, I tell my athletes from South Louisiana, I still help out LSU baseball. And I always use the example for them, like you guys as a season as a cast iron pot. All right. We use cast iron because every time you heat it up, it brings a seasoning that's been imparted on it by past experience
Mm,
into it. You cannot destroy a cast iron pot.
mhm,
All right. It is built for heat, but the seasoning comes up every time. As a parent, we make mistakes. We do. Our kids are resilient for a reason. Kids, you're resilient. You're not trauma victims. People do have trauma, but just because your parents said a cross word to you doesn't mean you have to carry that trauma. I don't believe in the whole trauma literature. I don't. I've worked with trauma. I've seen people who have had horrendous trauma in their life. The fact that a coach yelled at you and you can't let that go, you need to learn how to. Don't carry it as a badge. That and people are going to be pissed. I'm sure I'm going to get some messages on that. The reality is you don't need to have a calling card or a label. Don't label yourself either. I have scars on my hands. Those are past experiences, right? I've done stupid stuff that have caused me to get hurt. I've had bad things happen to me. I've done stupid stuff. I've made mistakes, but I've used every one of those as a way to improve me, not carry the burden and continue to give it more power.
mhm.
I refuse to give people power in my life that are not me. So, as a leader, as a coach, as a person, you have to understand that the influences we have around you, sometimes the most powerful ones are the most painful. But I'm not working to prevent those from happening again. I'm living forward with the wisdom that those brought me to do a better job in an uncertain world.
Mm.
You do those things, I think you can be really successful. But we are not perfect. We're always a work in progress to the day we die.
Wow, Brett, this has been an amazing conversation, and I'm going to end up watching this multiple times through and just taking notes. I feel like I got a free leadership lesson from a very, powerful, very, very well-trained psychologist that we have in you. For others who are interested in learning more about you and what you bring to the table, maybe they're potentially interested in working directly with you.
Mhm.
What's the best way they can
You
get in
know,
touch with you? What's the best way they can consume more of your
in
content?
today in today's world, the best way to do it is hit me up on social media. It's at Dr. Bhrett McCabe, Bhrett. I'm spelling my name a little bit differently. You always hit me up there. I'm active on all those. I have a TikTok presence. My kids run my TikTok account. I don't understand it. I'm 53. I've learned a bunch of the other ones. I like to get on TikTok, just don't understand the damn thing. But yeah, that's the best way to hit me up. And one thing I know is I don't speak psychology. I went to LSU. I didn't go to Vanderbilt. So, I went to maybe Vanderbilt on a river, but they always say about Nicholls State down in South Louisiana is Harvard on the Bayou. But I just try to look at things from the simplest approach possible. That's
Yeah,
how my mind works.
which actually is what I had to teach myself how to do at Vanderbilt. Try to break everything down to the simplest components because it tends to explain to you
Yeah,
why people do the things that they do.
100%.
Well, thank you very much again, Brett.
You got it.
This was wonderful, and I really hope our viewing audience got as much out of this as I did. And please reach out to Brett with any questions that you have.
Thank you very much.